Whelan Presley Funeral Home and Crematory have been serving Quad City families and veterans since 1889. Whelan Presley Funeral Homes are located in Rock Island, Milan, and Reynolds, and are proud supporters of WQPT. Alternatives is a proud supporter of WQPT and has been serving our community for 40 years. Alternatives provides professional guidance to maintain independence and quality of life for older adults and adults with disabilities.
The race for the newly drawn 1st Congressional District in Iowa pits a Democratic newcomer against a Republican freshman. We'll talk with Iowa's U.S. Representative Mariannette Miller Meeks on the cities. Iowa and the rest of the United States redrew its congressional lines after the 2020 census, and this is really the first test of those new districts. The new Iowa 1st includes all of southeast Iowa, from the Quad Cities and Maquoketa down to Burlington and Keokuk. It now stretches to Indianola near Des Moines and includes Iowa City as well. But cities like Cedar Rapids and Waterloo and Ottumwa are no longer part of the 1st District. Republican Mariannette Miller Meeks is running for re-election in the 1st, moving her official residence from Ottumwa. Christina Bohannon, the Democrat, is a law professor from the University of Iowa and her opponent. We talk with the incumbent U.S. Representative Mariannette Miller Meeks about her campaign and the issues that are impacting people in Iowa's 1st Congressional District. So tell us about yourself and why are you running?
Well, I think many people know that I'm the 4th of 8 kids. My dad was in the Air Force, enlisted in the Air Force. My mom had gotten a GED. Both my parents worked my entire life. I don't remember them not working. And on the weekends, sometimes my dad would have extra jobs to support the family. I remember going to pizza parlors with him to clean and fixing TVs at the time when they had tubes and they weren't flat screen. But when I was 15, I was severely burned in a kitchen fire, and it was a very, very long hospitalization. Had a wonderful physical therapist and decided I wanted to be a doctor and help people the way that she had helped me get through that very traumatic experience. And so when I came home from the hospital, literally came home from the hospital, told my parents I wanted to be a doctor. And as many parents, when their child, teenager especially, comes up with something they think is kind of harebrained, they try to be discouraging or dismissive or let you know what reality is. And for me, being in that negative environment wasn't going to help me get to where I wanted to go. So I left home at 16, started working, enrolled in San Antonio Junior College. My dad was then stationed back in San Antonio, Texas. And I just kept working and going to school until I got a degree in nursing, master's in education, ultimately got into medical school. And along the way, happened to enlist when I was 18. And spent 24 years in the military, both from enlisted to officer, active duty to reserve, and retired from the reserves after 24 years as a lieutenant colonel. So an amazing story of tenacity, I think, perseverance. But really, it's not a unique story. And as we were talking right before we went on, it's a story that is very common to a lot of people and a lot of Americans. And that ability to transcend your circumstances, no matter what your race, no matter your socioeconomic background, your religion, your ethnicity, or even if you immigrated to this country and became a legal citizen, that ability to achieve in America is so uncommon around the world.
You also then entered politics. You were in the state legislature, and then you ran, winning this congressional district in a narrow, razor-thin victory. The fact that it was such a close election, losing to Rita Hart by about 6 votes, it didn't really give you any kind of a mandate. Did it give you a sense of what this district, although it's been redrawn, of course, but a sense of what the Southeast Iowa district is like?
Well, having campaigned in Southeast Iowa for many years, I think I have a very good understanding of the district. But you don't need a mandate. You're there to serve. And so what I set about doing, and at the time when I was sworn in, I said, I don't care if I'm 1 week in Congress, 52 weeks, or 352 weeks. It doesn't matter. I'm here to serve the people of Southeast Iowa and make sure that they have representation. So that's exactly what I did. I spent my time in Congress. I had put forth bills. I've passed over 13 bills now, had 5 of them signed at the White House. So I've been for bill signings. That's a huge achievement when you're in a minority. Many of those related to veterans issues because I'm on the Veterans Committee, Homeland Security, Education, Labor, and then the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Task Force. But I really set out to serve the people of Southeast Iowa. So my first couple of months, because we were in the height of the pandemic, we had just gotten the vaccines approved for coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2. We didn't know as much about the vaccine as we do now, certainly, but I was giving vaccines. I went to vaccine clinics, workplace clinics in all 24 counties, and then proceeded to, continue to work. As people brought issues and concerns to me, I brought those to Congress. And several of the bills that I passed are from things that people brought to my attention when I was visiting within the district. So I do a quarter Grassley. So Senator Grassley visits all 99 counties once a year. I visit all 24 counties 4 times a year. So we finished our 4th quarter Grassley. But being the representative for the people of Southeast Iowa is both an honor and it's very humbling, and being able to serve them.
You brought up COVID and you brought up vaccinations. Is it frustrating that people don't believe in vaccinations or don't believe in it? And is that not part of society right now? I mean, you're facing a very caustic opposition. There's people that don't believe anything a politician says. Is that what 2022 is like?
Well, I think what's frustrating is that and I've had the opportunity to receive testimony and ask questions of both Dr. Walensky and Dr. Fauci. Mm-hmm. And so what's frustrating is when our institutions don't acknowledge things that are common public health. So when I would ask about infection-acquired immunity or schools being closed, and that Iowa opened its schools, that Europe did not close its schools, about masks and talking about, why do we have a mask mandate? In April, I'm introducing legislation to get rid of the mask mandate for 3- and 4-year-olds in Head Starts. Those things are frustrating because as a former director of the Iowa Department of Public Health, especially when it comes to public health, that having faith and trust in our institutions is critically important. They have to be credible organizations. And so when you have institutions and you're getting testimony of these people and they don't acknowledge what is very common public health knowledge, it becomes frustrating because we have to have faith in those institutions. So when we see institutions that are politicized, and it doesn't matter what party politicizes them, but right now there's concern about politicization of the FBI.
And that's where I wanted to go to next.
And what the FBI is doing, what groups it's targeting. When you have parents that are considered domestic terrorists, now, do I think that anybody should be threatening when they go to a school board meeting? Absolutely not. Do I, condone violence? Absolutely not. But you want people to go to their school board meetings. You want them to be involved within their government, especially on a local level. But to be called a domestic terrorist by the Department of Justice and have the FBI go after you, those things create tremendous divisions within our country, and they create a further lack of trust in our institutions. You're in communications. And we shouldn't be communicating or censoring, deplatforming, canceling people because they have speech we don't like. The answer to speech we don't like is not less speech. It is more speech.
Arguing about the FBI, Republicans have a very good chance of taking over the House, and there has been a big call among Republicans and conservatives to investigate the FBI, which is kind of turning the table, but also a call to defund the FBI. Do you find that somewhat disconcerting, the whole defund anything, including the FBI?
I think defunding any organization, but also remember that under the Biden administration, that there have been record increases in their budgets in all agencies except Homeland Security and the military, DOD. We were able to get some additional money for the military last year before the NDA or the National Defense Authorization Act was passed. But I do think where organizations have been politicized, we do need to investigate and look into that. We saw that with the IRS under the Obama administration when they were going after Tea Party groups or other conservative groups that were looking for 501c3 status through the IRS. And Lois Lerner retired with a pension and was never held accountable for what was seen as, introducing politics within the IRS, or the IRS releasing people's tax return who happened to be Republican and running for office. And we saw that with Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid when he disclosed Mitt Romney, then a candidate for president, when he disclosed his tax returns. So there is investigations that are worthy of having, because it's not one party or the other party, it's American citizens. And so what's considered to be confidential information when you file your tax returns, all American citizens should be concerned about that. And so I look at it more broadly from, if we can do this to people at this level, then what can an average, ordinary American citizen expect? And what can they expect out of their government? So I think it's important from the standpoint of how these organizations, how these departments conduct themselves, and that they know that they're accountable to the American people.
I was a little surprised that when you had your last debate on Iowa Public Television, you were asked what would be the first bill that would be introduced. And you were saying pretty much get rid of this idea that we need more IRS agents. That was almost your number one priority. Do you regret saying that that's your number one priority?
I think that's a huge priority, and people are very concerned about that. They're concerned, and if you, the Washington Post looked at that bill, looked at increasing the IRS's budget by 6 times what it currently is. And they said that over 50% of the people who will be targeted will be people making under $75,000 a year. So we're talking about regular, hardworking people. We're talking about regular, hardworking Iowans, farmers, small business owners. They don't have the ability to, number one, take the time, and number two, have a cadre of accountants and lawyers to go after and challenge the IRS if the IRS audits them and is trying to penalize them or to hold them to account not for anything illegal, but just for taking their legal deductions that they are. So when you're looking at an organization, and this was done under the guise of, we're going to go after millionaires and billionaires. But we know it's not going to go after millionaires and billionaires, according to the Washington Post, according to other organizations that have looked at this objectively. And even in the Washington Post article, 90% will be people making under $200,000 a year. So the IRS's contention is that even if we can get it cost us $10, we get $100. Why? Not because someone did something illegal, not because they were cheating, but because they were taking their regular deductions, and the IRS has a difference of opinion, but they don't have the time or the money or the accountants or the lawyers to go challenge the IRS's ruling. That's what's really happening. And so do I regret that? Absolutely not. I don't regret that. I am looking out for everyday Iowans who are doing things legally, taking their legal tax deductions, but they don't have the money to go and counter the IRS. The IRS has unlimited resources. Of the $80 billion, more than half of that goes to enforcement, not to taxpayer assistance, not to where we need it to go. My office is continuing to help people with tax returns from 2020, some even further than that. Why? Because the money that should go to taxpayer assistance isn't going to taxpayer assistance, it's going to enforcement. This is just to support the Democrats' continuing spending. Let's continue spending. We've had record spending in this past 18 months. Record spending, which has led to record inflation. Why don't we talk about inflation and what the spending has done to cause inflation? Let's talk about that issue.
The other point about inflation, as well as the economy, so much has to do with what the Federal Reserve does as far as money and lending. That drives interest rates, as you well know, and that has a ripple effect throughout the economy. Do you think the Federal Reserve has too much power when so much of what happens to the economy may not be in the power of Congress or the White House?
Well, within the power of the White House is the amount of spending, and that's within the power of Congress, and Democrats control Congress, the Senate, and the White House. So we have record amount of spending, which has led to record inflation, 40-year high inflation. And both Larry Summers and Jason Furman, who are not Republicans, worked in Democrat White Houses or Democrat administrations, both said back in March when they passed the $1.9 trillion COVID bill, which wasn't targeted, wasn't timely, wasn't temporary, wasn't necessarily related to COVID or addressing COVID, that it was going to lead to inflation. And it has led to inflation. And we've had serial trillion-dollar bills passed since then. So when you're looking at inflation and you're looking at who's responsible, how do you respond to inflation? How do you adapt or treat inflation? One is to raise taxes. That's tough to do when people are already paying. They can't afford to buy gas or go to the grocery store or afford their prescription drugs. So raising taxes is not a good scenario in high inflation. What else can you do? Reduce spending. Well, the Democrats have already shown they don't want to reduce spending. What's the other avenue? It's to raise interest rates, which is what the Fed is doing. What I would say was that the Fed was slow in raising interest rates. And I'm not going to say why they were slow in raising interest rates, but even last May, when we had Fed Chair Jerome Powell come to testify to us, at the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Task Force, I asked him about inflation and was it transitory? Because I'm just a country doctor. Transitory to me means 2 weeks. It doesn't mean 2 months. It doesn't mean 4 months. It doesn't mean 6 months. And we were already at 5-year record high, 5-month record highs back last May. I asked him about modern monetary theory, and I asked him about raising interest rates, because we know that raising interest rates is one way to tackle inflation. So now we're at record high interest rates, and it's not only how that affects the average citizen, but it also affects how we service our debt. So the interest rate we have to pay on our debt, on our bonds, is also increasing. And does that put us in this spiral, in this death loop? Because it will hamper the economy as well.
Economy, the other big issue, of course, the the Dobbs decision, the Roe v. Wade decision is now up to states. But there are indications that there could be a federal law, a ban after 15 weeks. Do you have an evolving opinion on abortion rights, or what do you want to see? Let's start with the national level, because I know a lot of people want to see it state by state, but what do you want to see on a national level?
Well, let me just say my position has not evolved. My position from the first time I ran for Congress, and it's in the public domain, is that I am pro-life with exceptions for life of the mother, rape, and incest. So that's my position. That's long been my position. Now, what the Dobbs decision did was to turn this back over to the elected representatives. So elected representatives are both in the states, which I think is where it primarily resolves, but also Congress people are elected representatives. I think because of my opponents' I don't want to say outright lies, but misrepresentation of where I was on abortion, I thought it was important that on a federal level, people knew where I was, which is I am pro-life with exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. And most people understand that a baby is pain capable at 15 weeks, that a baby is viable at 20 weeks. But yet you have a Democrat Party at the federal level, which has put forth a bill, and they almost, I think there was only one person who didn't vote for it, one Democrat who did not vote for it, that would have abortion up until the time of birth and even after birth. I think that's an extreme radical position, and it is not in keeping with the majority of Americans, regardless of their political party.
As a doctor, the argument, of course, is that it should be between the doctor and the mother. You're saying that, you know, there should be a limit like 15 weeks or 20.
I don't think that there should be law enforcement that goes after a doctor or goes after a mother, but I am saying the majority of people understand that an infant is capable of pain, that a baby is viable after 20 weeks. So when you're talking about late-term abortion, you're talking about a gruesome procedure that, quite frankly, most states' animal cruelty laws would not allow to be done to an animal. I've also put a bill through in the Iowa State Senate for oral contraception over the counter. I will continue to work for contraception, helping women to avoid pregnancy.
Let's talk about Ukraine. Totally different subject, of course. You're seeing Ukrainian forces making advancements. You're seeing Russian forces backpedaling. You're also seeing bombings that are occurring, of course, right now. Former President Trump saying, now's the time to negotiate. We need a settled peace. We have to avoid World War III. Others are saying, why would you give Putin a victory right now? Where do you stand? And others saying, how much more money of the national treasure can we give? Where do you stand when it comes to the fight against Russia in Ukraine?
So all of the points you just brought up are valid points to debate and to discuss. So first of all, why did this occur? And I will say it occurred because President Biden put us back into the Iran nuclear agreement, number one. Number two, had a disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, leaving Bagram Air Base, which was our point of eyes for both Russia, Iran, and China. And so we are now caught in this situation where sanctions weren't applied early enough. They could have been applied much earlier, and they probably would have been more effective. Putting troops around Ukraine, but not in Ukraine, may have been more helpful. But again, we didn't do those things. So trying to continue to bend over backwards to get back into the Iran nuclear agreement and appease Iran is not helpful in this scenario. Putin is watching what we're doing around the rest of the world and what our actions are. And our actions are not as strong as our words are. It was, I think, unfortunate for President Biden to say that this is Armageddon, but we all have to be concerned about whether or not Russia would use nuclear weapons. So I look at this more than just Ukraine. Number one, we asked Ukraine and have an agreement and a treaty with Russia that Ukraine would give up nuclear weapons in 1994 if we would allow them to be a sovereign, independent nation. So we do have an agreement with Ukraine in support of Ukraine. You've seen countries in Europe and Scandinavian countries now want to join NATO because they realize this is not just about Ukraine. This is about Putin's desire to reform the Soviet Union as it was. That's his desire, that's his goal. And so Ukraine is just one part of that. Which country is next? Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, Romania, Finland. So it is a broader issue on the geopolitical alliance. So yes, having military support for Ukraine, for arms, for missiles, for some air defense through Poland, I think is perfectly within the realm. Asking Europe to stand forward. But even more than that, what has happened with Russia and Ukraine has brought up a more important issue, and that is energy independence. What we're seeing right now happen in Europe is devastating. And I don't think people really understand what's happening with the energy front in Europe, that you have countries now burning trash. They're taking and cutting down ancient forest. Why? Because they don't have the energy as it's gotten colder, and we're not even into the worst part of winter yet. And that's because in their quest to reduce carbon emissions and in their green energy programs, they stopped fracking and producing natural gas. So they import natural gas, and without an increase, we're not near where we were at 13 million barrels a day, where we were in the Trump administration. We're not at that level yet in the US. And so tamping down on American and domestic production has left them at the mercy of Russia, which is creating a huge scenario. So we should also learn that in 2014, Putin cut off natural gas to Ukraine, that he does that, he uses energy as a cudgel, and that we should learn from that in the United States. We have to be energy independent.
And that's what's interesting, because you lead to the next question once again, and that is that there's a very strong Republican viewpoint, is that you got to continue with oil production. You've got to continue with the energy that we have right now and increase that. But also the belief that you need to develop greener energy. You need to develop more efficient cars, more efficient homes. You know so much about wind energy in Iowa. Where is the happy marriage on that? Because I know when you look at the infrastructure bill, you're going to say it's too big, it's too much, it was wasted money. But what is good green energy future that you see for America?
Well, I think Iowa actually has a great story to tell. And so Iowa, we have 50% of our energy is from renewable, over 50% of our electricity is from wind, and this is ethanol, biodiesel, manure, which people don't think about, biomass, wind, and solar. We used to have nuclear, and our nuclear power plant at Duane Arnold Nuclear Power Plant in Palo, unfortunately, is closed, but we're looking at nuclear again. So what I see is that we don't have an energy strategy. So we have a goal. The president has a goal that he wants, X number of cars to be electric by a certain date and time. But we don't have a goal of how we reach that. So there's a role for fossil fuel, fossil energy. How do we make that? How do we temper those carbon emissions? Whether it's growing trees, whether it's biochar with carbon sequestration, which also helps with drought, helps with soil and water retention, also helps with soil quality and water quality, whether it's bioethanol, biodiesel, bioethanol, renewable natural gas is another opportunity. So we know that globally there is still going to be a role for fossil fuels, but how do we transition to that? And do we want all vehicles to be electric? We know that batteries, if you take your cell phone out in your car in the wintertime, that battery does not last long. So we know that batteries don't stay charged. And the other thing that we're not looking at is the entire life cycle of energy production. So currently, our solar panels come from China. China uses slave labor. They use Uyghur Muslim labor. They have bad environmental practices. So can we mine for those things here in the United States? We have rare earth elements. We have lithium, cobalt, thorium. We have copper. You need a better electric grid for electric vehicles. Especially if there's self-generation, you need a better electric grid when electrons move both ways. And so, but we don't have a policy for that. And we're not allowing mining. We're not permitting, for instance, the Duluth copper mine in Minnesota, which is our largest store of copper. So we need to have environmentally friendly practices in mining here in the United States, mining for those elements, and then we need to look at the life cycle, both how we produce that source of energy generation and how we dispose of that. And so some things that may seem to be environmentally friendly ultimately will not be environmentally friendly. Natural gas has no carbon emissions. Nuclear has no carbon emissions. So I look at all of the and any of the above, and we've already got a great track record of doing that in Iowa. It's why I joined the Conservative Climate Caucus. It's why I talk about energy and the environment a great deal, because you, I, and all of us want to leave a cleaner, healthier planet for our children and grandchildren.
Our thanks to Iowa U.S. Representative Mariannette Miller Meeks, the incumbent running for re-election in the Iowa 1st Congressional District. Miller Meeks is facing Christina Bohannon, the Democrat, in November. I'll have a program note in a moment, but first, here's Laura Adams, Out and About.
This is Out and About for October 14th through 22nd. Actress and educator Judy Winlock portrays Miep Geis at the Bettendorf Public Library the 17th at 6, while the Quad City Symphony Orchestra perform a chamber opera based on the true story of 2 Holocaust survivors. The opera, titled To Remain, will be held at Bruner Hall on the campus of Augustana College the 22nd at 7:30. Both events are held as a part of the Out of Darkness Holocaust Messages for Today initiative. The Bucktown Review's Spooky Halloween Show returns to the Davenport Junior Theater on the 21st at 7. The Putnam Museum hosts their Mad Scientist Ball Family Night on the 14th. The Friends of Fairmont Cemetery Fall Fest take place the 15th at 11, while the QC Botanical Center hosts their Not So Scary Halloween Walk each Friday in October at 6:30. Plus, Port Byron hosts their Oktoberfest the 15th starting at 2, and Holy Stumpkin offers more fall fun at the Black Hawk State Historic Site on the 15th from 5 to 7. The Figge Art Museum celebrates Dia de los Muertos, a free family day the 16th from noon to 5, plus German Fest will take place at K Square across from the Adler Theater on the 14th from 6 to 10. On stage, Clue the Musical continues at Circa 21, and the Buffalo Community Center present Knock Knock Who's There, a comedy fundraiser the 21st from 7 to 9. For more information, visit WQPT.org.
Thank you, Laura. This interview actually concludes our effort to interview all 4 congressional candidates for the seats that directly impact the cities. Our discussions included those with Illinois 17th Congressional District candidates, Democrat Eric Sorensen and Republican Esther Joy King, and Iowa 1st candidates, Mariannette Miller Meeks, the Republican incumbent, and Christina Bohannon, the Democrat. These discussions are also appearing the weekend before the election on WQPT TV. On the air, on the radio, on the web, on your mobile device, and streaming on your computer. Thanks for taking some time to join us as we talk about the issues on the cities.
Whelan Presley Funeral Home and Crematory have been serving Quad City families and veterans since 1889. Whelan Presley Funeral Homes are located in Rock Island, Milan, and Reynolds, and are proud supporters of WQPT. Alternatives is a proud supporter of WQPT and has been serving our community for 40 years. Alternatives provides professional guidance to maintain independence and quality of life for older adults and adults with disabilities.